At number two, we're tackling something almost every caregiver has done: yelling. This short explains why yelling can shut kids down emotionally and what to do instead. Let's check it out together.
Is big bad adult screaming at me. When a child thinks that an adult is screaming at them, there's nothing they can do but be scared. So if you are shouting, raising your voice, anything like that, it's time to tap out, let somebody else come in and help little Timmy regulate.
Yelling activates the fight or flight response in kids, and that shuts down their ability to learn or to problem solve. In that training that I keep coming back to, it's called From Chaos to Calm: Effective Strategies for Handling Difficult or Disruptive Behaviors. I've done that training all over the country this past year, and in that training I talk about how the fight or flight response is really kids being trapped in the lowest part of their brain. It's called the reptilian brain. It's the brain stem, and that part of the brain is only responsible with keeping us alive. It's not responsible for rational thought. It's not responsible for understanding emotions. It's not responsible for problem solving. It is just responsible for heart rate, breathing, and digestion, and this fight or flight response. When children are being yelled at by an adult, it causes them to panic, and it sets off a part in their brain called the amygdala that traps them down in that fight or flight response. When you are yelling or screaming at a child and you see that their face gets really wide and they go like this, it may seem like you've got their attention, but really what you've done is you've trapped them down in the fight or flight response. There are also times where I've seen adults yelling at children and the child will start to giggle. That giggling is a fight or flight response, and then the adult will call out the giggle. They'll say, and oh, you think that this is just so funny, and the child isn't thinking that it's funny. They are trapped in fight or flight mode. They are not rationally thinking. They are not rationally responding. They are trapped. Now, also on this short, there have been some comments that were posted saying, what do I do if my child is running across the street and I need them to stop running across the street because there's a car coming, or running in the parking lot, or whatever dangerous thing it might be? In those situations, it could be that you have to raise your voice or yell or shout or even scream to get their attention, to activate that fight or flight response, because you want them to look and see, oh my goodness, there's a car coming. But if you are just yelling at and screaming at your child because they are being quote unquote disrespectful, and you are causing them to trigger into that fight or flight mode, don't expect a more rational response. Or if you are yelling at or screaming at your child in order to quote unquote teach them a lesson and quote unquote discipline them, don't expect that lesson to stick, because when people are trapped in that fight or flight mode, there isn't memory that gets encoded. It is just reactive. So if you start yelling or screaming at children because that's how you're going to discipline them, just expect to have to yell or scream more often, not less often. What you can do instead is, yes, you can be firm, and you can use a firm tone to set boundaries without escalating your emotion. That yelling and screaming to a child is just big, bad adult yelling and screaming at me. And when a child sees big, bad adult yelling and screaming at me, there's nothing they can feel but fear. And that is what I was trying to convey in that training. That training specifically was done for the YMCA of Greater Louisville, where I spoke to all of the staff who would be working at the YMCA summer camps for the entire region of Louisville. That includes parts of Indiana. And I was sharing with them, I know that sometimes you are going to feel amped up, that you are going to feel escalated yourself. When you start to feel that way, it is time for you to tap out and let someone else deal with this child and deal with what's going on. It's okay to say that you need a break too. It's not about denying that you are feeling emotions and going, no, I'm just fine. Everything's fine. I'm going to be just fine. It's not about doing that. That also looks fake to a child, and it doesn't teach the child how to handle their emotions. In an earlier video, I explained that in order for a child to show respect, they have to be shown respect first. The same is true here. In order for a child to learn to deal with their emotional response, they have to be able to watch you deal with your emotional response. That even though you are feeling escalated, that you are going to stay in control of yourself. Yelling and screaming at a child tells the child the way to deal with this emotion is to start to yell and scream back. And also, just so we can take it to the next level, in so many of my videos, I talk about the prefrontal cortex and how that part of the brain is not developed in young children and how that part of the brain helps us understand language. Because children don't have access to a strong connection with the prefrontal cortex, they aren't great at using language. So if they are yelled and screamed at often, they don't have the words to yell and scream back. They will either just scream and make an audible noise, or their yells and screams will come out in disruptive behavior rather than in words, because they don't have the words. They don't have the part of the brain that helps them to understand what words to use. So if you yell and scream at them, what a child sees is, okay, the way to deal with this is to yell and scream, but I don't have the words, so I'm just going to throw a tantrum. Or I'm just going to throw something, because yelling and screaming feels like things are being thrown at the child. And the child says, okay, well, I guess this is how I'm supposed to deal with emotions. When I feel these big emotions, rather than staying in control of myself, I need to start yelling and screaming and throwing things back at the person who's making me feel this way. Children will do what it is they see you do much more than what you say to them. If you want them to stay in control of their emotions, make sure that you do your best at staying in control of yours so that they know how to handle it. And when you mess up, because you will mess up, go to them and be honest and apologize, and don't make excuses, and don't say, but you were... Nope. It's just, I should not have handled that way. I am so sorry. It's something I'm working on. I am really going to do a better job at not yelling and screaming so much. Please let me know if you feel like I'm doing that. My niece is so cute, and over the past week I've gotten to hang out with my niece and my nephew quite a bit for the holidays. And my niece, she will hear me talking with Stark, and if you don't know about Stark, Stark is my service dog. He is the absolute best. And Stark is very obedient as well. So I don't raise my voice to Stark. I don't have to scream at Stark. I really can just say, Stark, get to your place, or Stark, come here. But my niece, she looked at me and she said, Uncle Stu, you don't talk so nice to Stark. And I said, it seems to you like I'm being rude to Stark. And she said, yeah, you're being rude to him. And I said, okay, well, if you feel like I'm speaking that way to him, just let me know. Later that night, she was in the middle of telling a story, and I was calling Stark over to me, and she stopped her story and she looked at me and she goes, Uncle Stu. She threw her hands up, and it was like a, come on, we just talked about this. And I said, you thought that sounded rude? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. I go, Starky boy, come here. You are just the best. Come here. And she goes, that's better. Think about that as you are working with kids. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. Oh, Starky boy, come here. It's okay to be firm, but make sure that you are not escalating your emotions as you are dealing with disruptive behaviors. If you start to feel yourself lose control, take a break, just like you would ask a child to take a break if they were losing control of themselves during their episode of emotionality. It's okay to tap out. It's okay to ask for a break. It's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to apologize. Let me know in the comments, have you tried lowering your voice instead of raising it? What difference did that make?